Thank you all for joining us today to share about your experience and your journey. So, first thing that I want to hear about is briefly, if you could briefly tell us about your invisible disability, knowing that that's a broad spectrum of neurodiversity, physical, and sensory. Who would like to start and go first?
I can. So I am what is known as ADHD. I'm a combination of autistic and ADHD. I've known I was ADHD since I was young. However, there was an improper label on that. I was actually diagnosed being in a very rural school district in a country school as mentally retarded as a child because I was nonverbal and had dyslexia and some other various things. And it took until I was 12 for somebody to actually give me the correct label and help bring me out of my shell and bring me to where I am today. But I also have MS. So I have a few of those invisible disability pieces. So I have those invisible disabilities. Being ADHD, I have a visual spatial learning disability. I am dyslexic, and I learned I was autistic when we were going through the process of getting my son diagnosed 20 something years ago. And life made a whole lot more sense when I added the autism spectrum diagnosis to everything. And I am an advocate, and I actually am an ADHD coach and an education specialist in the ADHD and neurodivergent community.
Thank you, Danielle. Who wants to go next?
I can jump in. Christy, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you guys. My name is Anessa Powell, and I love identifying, I should say, as that invisible disability in the rare disease space. I have Addison's disease, and it actually falls into two categories. It's a rare disease, but it's also autoimmune. And if you're familiar with autoimmune, it doesn't just like to stay with one, it likes to collect over time. So mine actually began with my thyroid after the birth of my first child and developed Hashimoto's. Then after the birth of my second child, that's when I developed Addison's disease. I stopped having children because I thought that probably wasn't going to be able to be good for my long-term health. No, I kid. But it was an interesting ride. It was a ride where, as being diagnosed in your 30s, you learn very quickly that you are told many different things, especially if you're a woman and especially if you're a mom. So I can go on and on talking about that, but my newfound passion was formed when I was diagnosed, and I'm very uh, loving being in this space, especially the disability space, and having a voice for those that don't oftentimes have a voice to share or feel empowered to share, and that's what I love to change.
Okay, Brooke.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brooke Elliott. Very glad to be here. And I'm still learning about this space, and I'm highly intrigued and very grateful that I met Christy and have the opportunity to learn more. So I actually fall within the three various categories, and I'm not fully diagnosed in some of the areas. But if you look at the neurodivergent category, I've had doctors that have said to me while I'm in their chair, "You have ADHD." Yet I haven't been properly diagnosed. And so that's a journey that I haven't yet gone down, but I definitely believe that it has affected me in many different ways in my life. And it's interesting to me because as I grow older, various things, I reflect on various things that have, brought about just reflection of, how I processed things as a child, how I was different, and now things are coming to light as I'm learning more and more. So some of the other things are under the physical. I do have IBS. I also have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. We thought it was celiac after my first son was born, which was later changed to gluten sensitivity. And I also have reactive mononucleosis, which is Epstein-Barr virus. And 95% of adults actually have it. However, only a very small percentage have the reactive piece. And so that has affected me quite drastically over the course of my career. And we can talk more about how I've changed things because of that in the future here. And then in addition to that, in the sensory realm, I do believe that I also have auditory processing disorder. I am very affected by background noise, and it has affected the way that I relate and communicate and my ability to collaborate in certain spaces. And so just the knowledge of that has been very eye-opening to me. But I would say that there are some other ones too, but not ones that I would necessarily highlight today.
Thank you, Brooke, for sharing. And so I would love to hear from all of you in terms of how has what you learned about yourselves over the years, how has this impacted you in the workplace? And have you shared any of this in a work environment?
So I have absolutely shared it in work environment when I worked in corporate. And the first time I shared, I was immediately demoted. Um, I went from being a project manager to being a secretary. They would not let me handle any projects. They wouldn't let me take notes in meetings any longer. They knew they couldn't fire me because I had disclosed, and they found as little for me to do as possible. The second time I disclosed, it was just at a team level, and I happened to work on a whole entire team of neurodivergents because I was working in tech, and that's very typical in tech to have a ton of autistic and ADHD men working in tech. And that was embraced. And that was the first time that I learned to accept my neurodivergence. And our manager was fantastic at working to each of our strengths. And then the next manager that came in was the exact and total opposite and ended up firing our whole entire team. There were 14 of us. Over time, we slowly disappeared, mostly because he made our lives absolutely miserable, and set us up for failure at every single turn, which I think only one person left the job. Everybody else was fired for bad performance or various reasons. So I've seen both sides of both being accepted and then the complete and total degradation that comes with disclosing in the workplace.
Well, Danielle, I'm curious, what would you have wanted your employer to do to support you or help? And what could they have done different?
Honestly, just listen. Listen when I said, "Hey, I'm struggling today. Can I get somebody to sit with me and remind me of what the process was here? Can you send me notes from the meeting? Can you provide me an agenda before the meeting so that I can be prepared for it?" Just those really, I mean, as a neurodivergent, just those simple things is all I needed. Um, I didn't need a massive amount of accommodations. Please allow me to work in the conference room when nobody else is in there so I can work where there are no lights and shut all the lights off and not bother anybody else. Just those really simple things were all I needed to be successful in my job.
What about you, Brooke or Anessa? How has this impacted your work environment and how have you been supported or treated or what's your experience been?
So for me, in the corporate career, which I'm now removed from, when I had experienced a stress moment, and that brought about the diagnosis of EBV, the Epstein-Barr, there was a period of time when I considered FMLA because of how sick I was getting. We know that's triggered by stress, and I think the exactly what Danielle said, right? The support and understanding of what an individual is going through, and not necessarily taking drastic steps to accommodate, but there are basic team structuring that you can do to accommodate a performance and success of a team in total, and knowing that there's so many individuals that are affected by neurodiversities, right? It's something that I look back on and say, I'm probably not the only one, and there probably would have been so much greater team success and organizational success if there had just been greater knowledge, and support. And there's other things like allowing us to have more space for quiet and not having the cubicles where people are calling on the phone next to you all during the day. And for me, I'm focused on what an individual is saying next to me, or their keyboards typing, right? And so having the space within the four walls of the building to be able to focus and to deliver in the ways that I know that I can would have been really great at that time.
Vanessa?
So I have a little different story. So when I was working for a corporation, it was my younger days. This was before kids. So my sickness didn't occur until it was later, and I was actually a stay-at-home mom. However, I had every intention of returning to work full time, and that's when my health decided to take a sideways turn and went through that diagnostic odyssey of figuring out what the heck was going on with me. So now working in this space, I have a very different perspective, and I'm a part of the disability space. And with my company, All Ability Solutions, I look at it from the other side and helping in our consulting prepare organizations, preparing HR teams, line managers. So when they do receive these conversations and these requests, they can respond accordingly with compassion, to your point, Brooke, with understanding, to also your point, Danielle. So these types of situations don't continue to happen. As we know, there's 25% of the population with a disability here in the States. And that number, I think, is underestimated. I really do. And it's going to continue to grow. I really feel like it's going to be upwards of 40% before long, and how our business is adapting to that. So I mentioned this several times, but it's just something that I care deeply about. And I think it continues. The education is so vital in making that change.
Well, it's interesting that you give that statistic because Danielle introduced me to Dr. Jessica Hicksted, who just released some great research in the space, and she actually found that 73% of the workforce have an invisible disability
Yeah.
in the work environment. And so it's a lot higher than any of us ever thought, because there's usually the label or the categories, but when you think about invisible disabilities, it's truly a very broad, all-encompassing group, and the person next to you needs a little help on something, and it may be something you have no idea about. So,
right.
Brooke, you shared some of yours. We have some of the similar ones. So I have that wonderful Epstein-Barr virus living inside of me too, that makes a comeback every once in a while. It's interesting to hear your perspectives and hear what have been supported or not supported. My question is, what would you need in a work environment to do your optimal work? You've started to allude to that, but let's craft your ideal environment and let's put that onto the table. Who wants to get us kicked off?
So for me and most of my neurodivergent clients, because this is something that I talk about daily with my clients, is fluorescent lighting, or only lighting on a desk, like a desk lamp, no overhead lighting at all. Being able and allowed to use noise canceling headphones, loop earplugs, all of those things, having agendas before a call, only having a max number of calls a day, so that that expectation is kept, so that somebody can actually get their job done without the stress of transitioning in and out of meetings. Transcription during meetings, follow-up summaries of action points from meetings, and the flexibility to work from home if needed. Many Over 80% of people that are neurodivergent also have a health issue that goes with it. So having that flexibility to work from home, even if you are in an office company when needed, is huge. And flexibility for start times. We have things like migraines. We have things like other health issues. We may have children. Things like that, just having a flexibility with that we absolutely get our work done, and we absolutely put in the required amount of time for the job, but the time is not clock based on some arbitrary schedule that actually doesn't make sense, which is a big problem for neurodivergence. That they're like, I don't have to work 9 to 5. I can work 11 to 8, or whatever 8 hours is, because I can't do that math in my head. because it does not matter what the time is. As long as I make sure I'm available for client calls and the things are required of me, why can't I do the job in a flexible way?
Well, what I'm struck by is that a lot of what you're talking about is low or no cost to the company to be able to do all of this.
And most of us come with our own accommodations. Like I will bring my own noise canceling headphones, my loop earplugs, in my desk lamp. And I'm happy to provide all of those things for myself. Just let me do it. Even my own transcription software, I do understand that there's security for some workspaces and stuff that doesn't allow for that. But if you don't have that security built in, I will bring my own software because I use it in daily life outside my job anyway. Allow me to bring my own accommodations with me.
Well, Anissa, I saw you shaking your head in agreement. Would you like to share what your perspective?
Now, I just have to say, I love being on a call with people that get it. I just love it. You have the knowledge, you have the understanding, and having this commonality is fantastic. I would just say, just from that chronic illness perspective that some of you who may be watching can relate to, fatigue is a big factor for me and my disease. And so I have to be very mindful of my spoons. If you're familiar with the spoon theory, if not, go Google it. It's an amazing example of how I try to share with my friends and my family and coworkers about what that's like and preserving my spoons. So when I know that I'm going to be doing, for instance, traveling a lot for a conference or speaking engagements, I'm very mindful of my schedule and what that looks like the day after. I don't schedule any early meetings or any meetings per se with the camera on. I'm very mindful of that because I have to be aware, because it will catch up with me if I don't stay on top of it. And one thing I've really learned is just to be mindful of advocating for myself and saying, no, I'm not going to have that meeting at 8 a.m. the next day. I respectfully know me, and we're going to put it to another time, and we're going to make it work for both of us when I can be at my best self. So just looking at it from that perspective is always something to be aware of.
Brooke, what about you? I saw you shaking your head as well.
Yes, so both Danielle and Anessa have said things that have definitely resonated with me here. What I really like about what Danielle has said is that she already has the software. She has the accommodations that she knows she wants and needs to bring. And I'm looking at myself and saying, I wish I were there in my journey. Knowledge is key, right? And the support is key. And to be able to first, again, going back to the understanding from the employer side or whomever it may be, of understanding what the individual's going through and then providing the tools or the environment. And so when I love the idea of being more strategic in the tools that are provided, like you said, Anessa, setting boundaries. How do you set boundaries? What does that look like? And what are you going to be comfortable with doing in, a corporate environment? And providing tools where you're learning about how to have work-life harmony, and stress management tools, right? And again, I go back to knowledge is key. I've learned so many things over just the last 3 years around, positive intelligence and understanding how I can learn more about myself to manage my stress and my stress triggers. And then it also goes back to being able to get up and take a break. Can I take a 10 to 15 minute break from my job? Is that something that is acceptable, to get up and actually go outside for 10 to 15 minutes, or go to a quiet space where I can read, because that's the way I kind of clear my head? And potentially, are there, say, gluten-free snacks in the vending machine? Are there options for everybody? So these are the things that I think tools, it could be software, it could be opportunities to record conversations so that you can listen back to them. But all of that goes back to support from the support and the employer, showing that they take the time to understand and they're taking the time to be strategically focused on your needs.
Well, and you're leading right into the next thing I'm curious about. So if an organization employer were to do all of those things, how would that impact you, your experience, and let's just be honest, your productivity?
as somebody who has done this and been doing this a long time, our stats here and our data here in D Loud is that 90% increase in productivity when accommodations are allowed, not provided, allowed. That's it. 90% increase in productivity when accommodations are allowed. And that's again providing your own, because most neurodivergent people and people with invisible disabilities like diabetic or MS or whatever, I'm going to bring everything I need with me. I don't need my employer to do that. But the fact that they have things like gluten-free snacks and the ability to not have lights on in my office and I can just use a desk lamp, and the expectations that there are only 4 meetings a day, not 12. And those things, having those things in place lets me know that the employer cares enough to allow my freedom to be productive. I'm not always masking when I don't have to mask because I know my employer accepts me, then I'm much more productive.
So you actually raise a good term that I want to unpack a little. Masking. What is masking, and what is the impact when you have to mask?
Masking is trying to put on the face and act neurotypical, or provide operate at a level that we perceive, we might not actually need to do this, but that we perceive is expected of us in the workplace. When you mask, you're using about 60% of your energy to mask each day, which decreases your spoons, increases your overwhelm, decreases your productivity, decreases your ability to focus and even access the knowledge that you have.
So, Anessa, I saw you shaking your head when we started talking down this path. You want to jump on in?
Sure. I mean, I think that you work with people that mask every day. I know that you do. And how do you, as an ally and someone that you work with, offer that space where they feel like they can be their true authentic self? Well, it starts with conversations. It starts with real conversations, but also it comes from a place of, I am here to support you. I'm not here to give you tips and tricks. No, I just want you to know that there's an opportunity here for us to work collaboratively. If I can get it out, collaboratively. There we go, together, and let's talk about ways in which that can happen. What is going to be great success factors for you? How are you going to be able to be supported in your role, and how can I help you do that? So I can go on tangents on about that, but just being very mindful that it's happening around you, and there's ways to change that every day.
Thank you for sharing that. Brooke, anything that you want to add?
So when I think about the impact that it could have on, say, the work environment, I think of, there's better decision making on both sides, because everyone is informed, and then there's less stress because of that. Perhaps a greater organizational connection because of that support, which can lead then to greater engagement, increased commitment, greater relationships, productivity, you name it, performance at the end of the day. But I think that greater support could lead to wonderful things where folks no longer feel like they have to mask and fear retaliation.
Well, I was on a call earlier today. It was Danielle, myself, and one of our team members. And one thing that Danielle did that was modeling things that can be done in the workplace was she actually stopped and asked the question to the person, what do you need at the moment? And so she picked up and identified that something was needed, that they were having they needed something, and just stopped and just asked, what do you need? And gave the person the space in 2 minutes, and they immediately went into I need this, and it kept everything moving amazingly well. Because up until that point, it was you could feel the frustration and the anxiety because they were not getting what they needed in the moment. And so those are some small, simple things that can be done. And to your point, it's just listening and asking the right questions. So, given what we know and what we've been talking about, how open do you think companies are to even hearing the conversation and embracing it, knowing it's low or no cost to be able to do some of these things? Or
Unfortunately,
too scary for them.
Unfortunately, very few companies are still willing to have these conversations and are still emotionally and productivity wise intelligent enough to be willing to ask these questions. Many managers dealing with them for clients. I have a client that is suing a company because she lost her job because she took too many notes in meetings because her manager was mad at her. And that's not, I mean, I have many clients who have had the same issue. So many managers are so untrained that unfortunately it is still not a safe space for us. And it is at manager level, not necessarily company level, because the company on paper and even online and things like that could be very open to those conversations, but they don't train their management and lead staff well enough to follow through with that, because all we need is to be safe, seen, heard. That's it. That's all we need. Again, accommodations, we come with our own accommodations 99.9% of the time.
Until disability training is embedded in an organization, it's going to continue to happen. The education is not there. It usually ends up coming about from a lawsuit, unfortunately, and that's when things start to change. But that's where conversations like this and getting the word out there, and how it needs to start through that education, and how, in order for your managers and for your HR teams to be fully prepared, training has to be a part of onboarding and continuation. It can't be something that happens your first day, you get the papers, you put it in your drawer, and you move on. No, it has to be ongoing conversations, interactions, role playing, you name it, on how to create these conversations with compassion and follow up and understanding.
It's interesting that you say that too, because it's so Jessica in her dissertation research is all about, instead of using the word accommodation, which has we know has a stigma around that, right? It's changing the conversation to how do I help? And how do we change the landscape or embed into management training, instead of saying how do I, what do you need and how do I fix it, to how do I help you instead?
Well, and to your point, Christy, the word accommodation itself invokes fear sometimes in organizations. They think it's going to cost me astronomical. And at the end of the day, to your point, it's such a minimal cost. And with All Ability Solutions and what we do, we're just constantly running up against that, and just that education that goes back to it. And it's so vital that organizations take note of that, because it's not going away. Like I said, it's just going to continue to increase, and you're going to have more and more, especially now with these return to office mandates that are coming in every day. The accommodations are just flowing in, and their teams are overwhelmed, and they're trying to stay on top of it, and they're not, because they weren't prepared. So that's, again, if they had been trained properly from the beginning, they'd be ready.
So how do we change the landscape or the word? Because I know the word disability also has a stigma to it as well. And a lot of the things when we talk about invisible disabilities, we've talked about simple things like noise canceling headphones, a desk lamp, or a migraine is an invisible disability, and there are ways that you can manage that respectfully and kindly. So how do we change the word? How do we, I don't know, lessen the intensity around that word disability in the workplace to more of how to, because otherwise how will people want to, like, why would people want to talk about it?
I think right now, because unfortunately in our current state in our country, at least in the US, we have to be very careful how we bring some of those words up and how we describe them. And so we have found that calling it productivity merit-based productivity, because whatever accommodations that a neurodivergent person needs, or even somebody with MS or whatever, those accommodations are usually beneficial to every employee regardless of diagnosis. So merit-based productivity and growth is where we're finding we're able to have more conversations right now by saying it that way. Because unfortunately, talking about disability, talking about accommodations, again, sets a company off that they can't afford accommodations. Please just let me bring my own headphones. That's all that is. By getting rid of the words that strike fear in the financial pocketbooks of companies, in removing the disability piece to prove that overall growth is what is needed has changed the landscape for us for the conversations. But again, it's a hard sell to get into companies to even discuss that.
Well, Anessa, this is what your company does. How are you changing that landscape?
Well, first of all, I firmly believe disability is not a bad word. It is not. It's something that's a part of me. It's not who I am, but it's something that definitely has changed the trajectory of my life. And so it goes back to education, but we always bring it back to level setting, right? When we're talking about, for us, it's accessibility and having that accessibility to be at the forefront. And it goes back to the data. The data shows that when you have accessible products and services and functionality, you're going to meet everyone where they are, and you're going to be able to be more productive for it. The numbers absolutely speak for themselves. I go back to that whole universal universal design and the curb cut effect. It was originally intended for those that are wheelchair users, but if you've ever pushed a stroller or a shopping cart, you're looking for that curb cut in the sidewalk. And that was just level setting, right? That was just an opportunity to meet the need of your customers. And when you look at it from that point and you bring it to an organization and you say, you want to increase your bottom line, let's talk about it. Let's go back to the accessible products and your digital accessibility and everything where you can meet your customers. That's how you're going to change it. It's nothing you do with talking about what those words are that can be very politicized right now. It's just meeting your people where you are. And who doesn't want to take care of 25% of your customers and 25% plus of your employees?
Love that. Brooke, anything you want to add?
I think the numbers say it all, right? So I think it was 73% of managers are neurodivergent. Is that the right number? Okay, so presenting that to organizations to me says so much, right? And being able to look at their organization and say, wow, if 73% of managers have are in would perform better if XYZ. How could we support them? And seeing that as a huge opportunity for growth for the organization, for there to be greater support for each other. I just think there's a lot to be done. And I think that organizations, if they were given that knowledge, but then there was also some sort of structure where the individuals could get, like, say, peer support from each other. I'm hearing all these things from Danielle that I think are so fantastic, and I'm like, wow, I wish I had some tools, and I need to collaborate with others that are in the same boat as me, and I would love to learn what they do to perform to their best abilities. And so if there was some sort of way to do that, I think that would be even better for the organizations.
Because I think you hit the nail on that. You just kind of highlighted something that's been kind of coming up throughout the whole thing, is that you are not the only one in the organization that is probably masking. The person next to you is probably masking something as well. Know about you, but whenever I start talking about my own invisible disabilities, everybody comes out of the woodwork of, oh my goodness, this, right? And so when we looked at the research, we found that actually Jessica found that on average, 25 people that have an invisible disability. That's a lot of people on average. So look to your left, look to your right. Somebody else may be struggling with something else. And how do you start that conversation at the find that group of people to lean into and get that support? Love to hear your thoughts on that. So how do you find your tribe internally or find that support, especially if the organization isn't providing it? How do you get it?
Talk about it. Don't be
How do
afraid
you
to talk
start that?
about it.
How do you start it
Uh,
with, instead of just, hey, I've got an invisible disability, who wants to chat?
Even just in coffee chats or sitting down for lunch, like the people that you tend to gravitate towards, have lunch with them. Have a cup of coffee with them. Meet at the water cooler. Chat about your weekends. I mean, just having human conversations again. We've lost so much community here in the US by starting the conversation. Everybody's looking for community. Everybody is looking for community. unless you're 100% antisocial, which is an invisible disability. There are reasons to be 100% antisocial, but you'll know who that person is and that they don't want to engage in those conversations. Look for the people that you gravitate towards. Look at I love your shirt. Where'd you get that? And if they are neurodivergent, if you are neurodivergent and they are a neurodivergent person, they are going to tell you everything about it, where they got it, how much they spent on it, why they love it. You'll know you found your tribe. But if they have diabetes, and this is a discussion that I didn't realize just listening to a couple of people who met each other at a conference who both had type 1 diabetes. She's like, I found the skirt and I love the skirt because my monitor fits in my pocket. That's why she loved the skirt. And the other girl's like, oh yeah, that's why I have these pants. And this is why, like, they found each other just by mentioning the pants or the skirt or just have conversations. It's all it is.
I would just like to add, if you're part of a larger organization, look for an employee resource group, an ERG. There are many corporations and many large companies have ERG groups dedicated to the disability community. And you can find the commonality there. And it's not only for those with disabilities, but caregivers as well. I think that's a really important piece to it, to just have that commonality. And if you don't have one, you can start one. And it really can transcend, and you'll be surprised. You'll find your people very fast once you start putting the word out there. And outside, if I could just add real quick, Christy, is that there are new things popping up all the time. I am a part of the Chronic Boss Collective. It was started by Lily Stairs 2 years ago. She saw and created this out of a need for women with chronic illnesses and wanting to find other women in the workforce that were facing the same challenges of how to own their identity as someone living with an invisible disability, balancing that and what that looks like. And so you find community there. Many things are popping up all the time where people are creating this because they're recognizing there is such a need. To Danielle's point about community, which is vital.
Absolutely. In the time that we have left, is there anything that you all want to or want people to know?
We just want to be acknowledged. We want to be acknowledged in the workplace, at home, with our friends. And if I say, I'm having a terrible day and I have 0 spoons, to have somebody ask why. Not just roll their eyes because it's another day of me saying that.
Okay, so somebody has to break it down for me. Explain the spoons.
Spoon theory is we all have the same number of spoons a day. And I actually have a jar of spoons over there that I usually bring out for this. But we all start with the same number of spoons a day. And somebody without a chronic illness or neurodivergence or whatever, it may take them 1 spoon to take a shower. Well, there are days that it takes me 25 to take a shower.
Right. Yeah. So we don't have finite spoons, and those that are shall we say, they can replenish their spoons very fast. But some of us, it takes time. We have to have that time and downtime where we can recoup and build our spoons back up. And
some people can eat a granola bar and replenish all of their spoons. I need a week to sleep after taking a shower some days.
Exactly.
Thank you. Just ask if I want to know. Anything else anybody else wants to share?
I would just like to add, if you're newly diagnosed or if this is something that you are starting to own as your identity or something that you're coming into, just know you're not alone. I never want anyone to feel like they're going through this and don't have a roadmap. And you oftentimes do feel like that when you're going through that diagnostic odyssey and you're trying to get answers. And, when I was diagnosed with Addison's, 1 in 100,000 people have it. And I thought, holy cow, what in the world? How am I going to live? What's this going to look like for me? But there was a whole group out there online that I found where I just soaked up all of this knowledge. So please just do your research. You'll be surprised who's out there and can help support you along the way.
And Christy, I would add too, from an organization standpoint, if the organization does a survey to collect results that include neurodiverse questions, then they should also follow up in the same survey with a paragraph that states what they're going to do with that information, what their intentions are, right? Because when you put out a survey that asks a question, but it doesn't give that information, it leads an individual to wonder, what's going to happen with this information and how honest can I be?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's the one thing is Jessica just didn't do just research in the space. She actually, part of her research was to create an assessment that is able to give that insight for companies to be able to gather that information, and not for the purpose of only for the purpose of where do we need to focus our conversations, where we need to focus our time, to the point earlier of which groups do we need to give some more guidance and insights and help and support. And that's everything from building psychological safety in the workplace, manager training, to onboarding, to what's needed. Everything is inclusive, and at least it gives you a great place to start, right? So before we wrap up, it's you all have shared on your side. I've shared with you individually, but Anessa got me started on this journey of understanding invisible disabilities in the workplace. We met through a Chamber of Commerce event and kind of hit it off and started talking. And then I had an aha moment one day, and I'm like, oh wow, okay. I'm neurodiverse. What the heck does that mean? And I need to start this journey and really unpack that, right? But then I got connected with Dr. Jessica and looking at her research, and I found that I have six invisible disabilities. Just alone, one neurodiversity. So for me, it's sensory processing. So I have a lot of information coming in, and so it can be overwhelming at times. And just being able to manage those spoons, you're right, some of those spoons deplete really fast depending on the day and the activity, or what's happened the night before, or when the meetings start, or all of that. Brooke, I also have latent mono, so it just pops up its ugly head every once in a while and just kind of wreaks havoc on your body. I also have migraines, which is considered an invisible disability. So if you've ever had one of those, they're debilitating, and you can't predict them, and when they come, they come. And then the worst one that I have, that I got the worst reaction from an employer from, and I was diagnosed with something called vocal cord dysfunction. So for years, I thought I had anaphylactic reaction to scents and fragrances, but actually what ends up happening is my vocal cords will lock up when I'm exposed to strong scents and odors, and they lock up, I stop breathing, and I can pass out. Oh, I know, it's super fun. And yes, the good thing is if I pass out, I can breathe again, and I'm not going, nothing bad will happen. But imagine in a workplace where it's a cubicle environment, and your colleague that sits right next to you walks in and has heavy perfume. And so I went up to her and said, I don't know how to say this. I really don't. This is awkward for me. I have this medical condition, and this is what's going on. And I have a reaction to strong perfumes. And her response was, well, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not going to change. And so I literally, yeah. And the challenge for me, and what made it worse, is that the reaction of the company wasn't to protect me or figure out how to work with us. And there was a policy that says no perfumes and strong fragrances, or talk to her about it as well. They literally go to the opposite end of the building, away from every other person in the company. And so this is near and dear to my heart, because I've been marginalized or ostracized, and I don't want that experience to be like that for anybody else, because I want to be part of a community. I want to be around people. I want to contribute, and I'm do my best work when I am in community with others. So we want to put faces to this thing, because when people hear from the people that are working it through and are living with it, and we all look normal, but we all have something that we are personally needing some help and support on, it just makes it even much richer, and our community gets bigger. So I want to say thank you all again for joining, and any last parting words before I hit stop recording?
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great discussion. Thanks, Christy.
Great work too.
Thanks for joining.